Okay, so I'm going to talk about the National Modelling Framework and give you an idea of the process that's went on behind developing the framework, the people involved, and then give you a flavour of what the framework looks like and what's next after that. So I'm going to talk about how we developed the modelling framework, what we've looked at in the past, learnt from some of the past experiences, and I'm going to talk about the sort of basis of the framework, what the building blocks were, how we then take forward that national approach, how it's focusing on problem solving, where it's not just the model, but it's more the data that's involved. And then I'll go on about data, and more data. And then how we have taken it forward beyond that sort of paper report that comes out at the end of most low emission zone scenarios. So the next step will be after that. So the working group itself, as mentioned before, we created several working groups, and for us to develop the modelling framework and the modelling monitoring framework, we developed a working group that focused on the end users, the local authorities, and also those that were used to dealing with data, manipulating data and analysing data. So it was a very wide-ranging working group that we developed. And the input from them was really taken forward in how we then took forward that modelling framework and how we progressed it. Within the modelling framework, we took forward a two-tier approach. There was a regional model that we're going to be talking about in a wee bit more detail, and a local model. The regional model was really there to try and assess spatial development and the contributions of large-scale development on air quality. So it's looking at those cross-local authority issues, because we've always been told that, you know, when one local authority might declare an air quality management area, the input from another local authority could still be quite significant, especially when large planning applications come forward. So what we wanted to do was to then consider these kind of local authority issues through an actual assessment process. So that's what the regional model is there to do, is to really focus on land use. And we're going to consider it around sort of areas such as strategic planning areas and strategic transport areas. The local model is more identifying the problem areas within a local authority, such as citywide areas, Glasgow, Aberdeen, those kind of things, to look at what the causes are, and then how we can identify what the potential solutions are. So it's a much more detailed model that we're looking at within the local modelling side of the framework. The regional framework, we looked at a whole range of different approaches. It wasn't just paper-based, we also had people coming over and telling us about the approaches that they took in Europe. And we decided to take the basis of the approach that was taken in Netherlands and in Belgium, where they used that regional model in order to assess large-scale planning applications. And it gives them much more confidence that these kind of planning applications don't have cross-border effects when it comes to local authorities. So we've taken that approach. We haven't taken their model, but we've taken that approach in considering how we develop the regional model. We really wanted to assess those contributions, and that's why we took that approach. The main thing would be that the model would be updated on a regular basis. That way then those large-scale developments will be included in future models. Local authorities would provide us with things like planning information when it comes to regional planning and regional development plans. And that would allow us then to build those regional models and to report against them. We've also learnt from what we did in the National Flood Risk Assessment approach, where engagement was really important. You can't get success unless you actually work in partnership. A single local authority working on their own is really difficult, but if they're working in partnership to implement things like low emission zones, etc., then they really can actually work much better and achieve the actions that they're looking for. Sound science is really important because you need to understand the information that you're putting in to anything, and also the information that you're getting out before you actually develop the actions. And that's what we're really keen on doing within that framework. Prioritisation and making decisions, and looking at areas where pollution is much greater, and the contributors to those pollutant areas really is key in delivering a good action. and obviously support. I got support there from Scottish Government, but I think support across a whole range of areas such as STEP and all the memberships within STEP. It's really important that you get support when you deliver your actions, and that's what we're aiming to do. The local model, really, we used Aberdeen as our pilot study in how we developed the modelling process. And I call it a modelling process, but it's really how we developed what data was required to be gathered, what data was required in terms of outputs, and how we analyse it, and then how we transform that into actions. And that's what the whole modelling process is all about, is developing data into actions. And that's what that was the theory that we took behind it, was putting that information and bringing evidence out, and then putting it towards decision making. SEPA uses this approach quite a lot. We use a problem-solving approach when it comes to other environmental issues, and we didn't think air quality was any different. We decided to look at the problems in terms of defining it, how you solve it, what kind of information you gather, and the working groups were really good at determining what kind of information we really needed. Identifying that sort of critical data and addressing any of the uncertainties that come out of any models that you actually put information into. And then turning that data into information, like I said. And we've been developing tools, which I'll go into in a little bit, on how to do that. So data. Data is really important. It's in terms of what traffic data you look at. It was really evident from the Aberdeen project. It was really evident from talking to others throughout Europe and also within the UK, that traffic data is essential. You need to know exactly what your traffic makeup is in the street in order for you to develop a model. And without knowing that traffic data, then how do you know what actions you're going to put in place? And how do you know then what actions that you do put in place are actually going to give you results? We want to make sure that you identify existing data and information that's out there. And when we did the Aberdeen project, we identified what traffic data was already collected, and also what model traffic data was collected and what we could use within the model itself. We then also went out and gathered additional data. As you can see, it's a cyclic process. You might run a model several times, but the whole point is that you're always building on the data that's gone into it, so that you can be sure that the data that's coming out the other end will actually deliver the actions that you're looking for. Collecting that different forms of traffic will help you really build that right picture. We know that there's only certain hotspots across major cities, but we also know, though, that each of the cities have got different traffic makeups. They're not all the same, so there's no point in taking that single approach for one city. Not everything fits all. You need to really know what the emissions are like across your streets, so that you get a really good traffic composition. If you want to create actions that are focusing on the key polluters, then you need to identify those key polluters. You want to put that information into something that's visual. You want to analyse it really in the nth degree to make sure that you're right, but you also want to create it so that local authorities and end users really have tools that they can use on their own platforms. So we've developed live and interactive visualization tools through our Spotfire applications and a few others. And you can see some of them demonstrated upstairs, where we've used Spotfire just to visualize air quality data within the database. We've also built online traffic profile identification processes. So when the information's, before you even put it into the model, you can identify where hotspots are, where busy junctions are, where key traffic corridors are, and also break that right down into individual traffic types. And I think that's really important, just to give you an idea of what data is missing, what data you need to go and collect. We scrutinised to the nth degree the model outputs, so we did. And we pulled together a range of data sets, because air quality is obviously, as you know, is impacted by weather and various other variables. And we looked at those data sets when we were scrutinising the data when it came out the other end of the model. So what did we do? We analysed the data to look for uncertainties. And we analysed it obviously against all the monitoring stations, diffusion tubes, etc. We even used CFD models where we identify certain stations where the model outputs wouldn't achieve the same results. And that was a really good way of identifying that you can't just go by what a monitoring station says, because the monitoring station could be in a location where weather has a great impact on it, where wind flow really either flushes it or builds up the concentrations, and that's what we identified through the Aberdeen process. So it gives you more certainty to the outputs that you're getting. We looked at additional data that we required to feed into the loops, AMPR data, remote sensing emission data, all those kind of things, in order to put it back into the model and bring out the correct information. So like I say, it's a cyclic process. You have to be able to transform that information into evidence, and how do you do that? Well, you could get your usual paper-based reports that tell you what actions you should put, but that doesn't give local authorities ownership of the actions that they want to develop. I think it's really key that if any actions are going to be developed, then it's up to the local authorities to consider those actions and to work in partnership with all the other transport agencies in order to develop them. And the only way of doing that really is by getting the actual information, the data, and playing with it yourselves. Being able to scenario test, and that's one of the things that we've been developing within SEPA, is scenario testing tools that would be online for all local authorities to utilise. It gets away from that paper-based report, really. It also promotes that collaborative approach in problem solving, because the information is there to be utilised by all. So what's next within the development of the modelling framework? Well, at the moment we're looking at developing a national traffic data collection process, where we'll be looking at fleet composition and where required roadside emissions through remote sensing. We're actually already looking at collecting traffic across other cities. The whole point is that we collect the traffic in a standardised way. We want to identify the data and resource sharing of opportunities, so really that collaborative approach has to be taken forward, and that's what we've been doing. And you can see that through the strategy that's been launched today, that it's really collaborative and forming. We're still developing the interface between the National Modelling Framework and the Low Emissions Framework, and you'll see that again today. And I think it's really important that we strengthen that relationship between the National Modelling Framework and the local air quality management process. And we'll be doing that through the review of the legislation which follows. Thanks very much for listening.